presentation. It's great to see all of you here as I get to talk about I say our because Bob was with me for 99% of it, magical sabbatical. A sabbatical is a once-in-a-lifetime experience for many pastors. Many pastors never get to have them. And for me, in my case, it occurred 31 years into ministry for me. Actually, I just realized I was ordained on September 19th, 1992. So it's almost my anniversary. I hadn't realized that until I was driving in this morning. So a sabbatical is a chance to step back for me as a pastor and kind of consider the long arc of God's call to me into ministry for the last 31 years. And also a chance for me to step back and think about our call, FPC, but now a little over 5 years, almost 6 years into it, my time with you all. And we're going to get to look at 20 years next week. Well, 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Sorry, didn't mean to make you nervous. And so a sabbatical is a chance to take a breath, kind of look at the long view, and see what God is teaching us, kind of put things into perspective. It's also a chance to think about the long view in the arc of who we are as a people, because we know that we are in a hinge time in terms of ecologically, climate change. We are really on the precipice of something. And of course, politically, this around the world, as well as in our country, this push-pull between authoritarianism and democracy and who we are and how to move forward in our time as a country and as a world. And then also who we are as a church, as a denomination. In the 31 years that I have been a pastor, we have consistently, PCOSC, they have been losing members. We're much, much, much smaller than we were when I began. And if that trend continues, it's a little hard to look forward and think, okay, what's next? Well, with all of that, we have 3 things that we can do on all 3 levels. We have the choice to deny those things and just pretend none of those things are happening, we're fine, let's just keep going. So there's denying it, or there's the second option is what? Can't we just go back to the way we were? If only we were the church of the 1950s. If only we were the USA of the 1950s. If only we were the world back then. If only we were the church the way it was back then. Well, the third option, because I don't think either of those are what God is calling us to, the third is to look forward and ask, what is God calling us to? What new thing is God calling us to consider? In the words of Walter Brueggemann, that we are called, and I believe our church is uniquely called, to think the unthinkable, utter the unutterable, and imagine the unimaginable together, which is where God is calling us to fulfill God's call for the world. We'll talk about that some more. But don't worry, I'm not going to preach another sermon. I'm going to dial this back a little by recalling that wonderfully, where's Mark Nelson? At the last outreach meeting before my sabbatical, he brought up that song, remember? Something's coming, something good. Well, now, something came, it was something good, and then it was, I don't know what it is. Now I do know what it was, but in terms of what it's going to call us to, I know it's going to be great, but we're still doing that. I'm still learning, we're still learning, and so having all of you here in this room together helps us as we listen and learn from God calling us forward, because a lot of really great things happened right here while I was gone. So I feel like, yay, sabbatical planning team, that this sabbatical was magical not only for me, but for all of you. Maybe not every day for Carmen was magical, but she was magical, yes? So, moving on, catch up with where I am here. We are... There's a chair here. You won't get to sit next to each other. Is that okay?
It's okay.
It's okay, Laurie.
I titled this talk, this presentation, which, by the way, I was going to say it's not going to be a sermon. Stop me if it starts seeming like what. Anya, will you just raise your hand? Okay. Nor is it going to be a travel log. I took probably 360 slides, and you are not going to see 360 slides today. Yes, really. There are only 64 of them that I have chosen. But if you want to get to see the Edinburgh Castle, if you want to get to see the Iona Abbey at sunset in 5 different versions, invite Bob and me over for dinner. So this is a presentation that's really focused on the project. So it's not necessarily exactly chronological, but thematic as we consider. This is a sunrise, by the way, on Flathead Lake, which is kind of native land for the Davis family. I have 10 more of these, but I'm only showing one of them. That can stand as a way to think about the new day to which God is calling us as a church and as a people. And as I thought about what would I do, what is God calling me to do in this time away, as you hear us say again and again, as well we should, we have been called to be a Matthew 25 church, and I was thinking, who knows exactly what we mean when we say that? Probably not everybody, but some of you do. Good. So I just wanted to throw that up there because, of course, the scripture, and Mike alluded to it in his minute for mission, has that phrase from which I took the name of the talk, when have we seen you? In Matthew 25, 37 to 39, Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when was it that we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? Or when was it that we saw you sick or in prison and visited you? So that call, I want to twist that or turn that just a little bit in terms of when do people see Christ in us? And where are we looking? Where are we blinded by maybe our white privilege or by our USA citizenship or all the things that can blind us to the people that are right around us, that we are not seeing, who are on the edge? That's part of what we're looking at. But the denomination as a whole is from that scripture, put it together, articulated this vision that we have taken on, which has these 3 parts. I won't read the whole thing, but I just wanted to put that up there for those of you who might want to refresh yourselves in what that means, and particularly focus on the middle one, dismantling structural racism by fearlessly applying our faith to advocate and break down the systems, practices, and thinking that underlie discrimination, bias, prejudice, and oppression of people of color. And I would add to that, and all other people who are oppressed for one reason or another. We are a lot better at building than dismantling. Did you ever notice that? So dismantling structural racism, I took that on. That if I had a whole 3 months to think about it, I could study and think more seriously what that might look like, because that's a big one. It's a hard one, and it's one that is central to our call. So that was part of my inspiration for the focus of my study. The next thing I wanted to share with you is something that I learned. This will connect ultimately. And maybe you guys already knew this, but God, we have the Bible, but God has 2 books, not 1, not 66, but God has 2 books. God has the Bible, but then also this, from Job, speak with the earth and it will teach you that God's created world was God's first word, God's first book that has been around up to the present time. If you were doing a clock from dawn to 11:55 p.m. existed. God was speaking before our Bible ever came to be. So this quote, some people in order to discover God read books, but there is a great book, The Very Appearance of Created Things. Look above you, look below you. Who do you think wrote that? Anybody have any clue?
I'm guessing John Calvin.
Good guess, but no.
Native American.
Doesn't it sound like it?
Yes.
Well, this is why it's so surprising. It's very much resonates with the work that I've done on indigenous spirituality. This is St. Augustine of Hippo. Yes. It was also, I learned in the book Speak with the Earth, and it will teach you, that at the beginning of the Reformation, Luther and Calvin also ascribed to this two-book idea. Now, as we well know, it kind of disintegrated in terms of the equal weight that was given to the two. But it is in our roots as Christians, as well as very central and important to indigenous spiritualities. And so I did a lot of reading of that first book this summer. We didn't go to church that much. Which, by the way, when I was talking about changes in the church, one of the things that I noticed, not being in church very many Sundays, mostly because my extended family and friends are not people that go to church. There's a lot of people that don't go to church on Sundays. We need to, once again, not close our eyes to that. Open our eyes. Think about that. So raising another question, something to think about. So does anyone know where this tree comes from? Anyone ever been to Powers Bluff? Skunk Hill? This is a marker tree. God's first word for the Prairie Potawatomi. We'll talk about them a little bit later. But just to notice this tree right in our own Wood County that was trained to be a marker tree, meaning where they would bury their dead. This happens to be my sister. She kind of looks like me. This is all the way in the botanical gardens in Edinburgh. Wow. The magnificence of trees, what trees can teach us as Christians and in partnership.
How old do you think that tree is?
Any botanists here that could guess? I don't know.
150.
More than that.
Hundreds and
I'm
hundreds.
guessing.
I could be older.
You can look it up.
Is that a
Mr. Google Map.
an evergreen? Those aren't leaves, those are needles, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh.
Then this is the rock that is kind of iconic at Skunk Hill that is considered sacred. And as we move into Scotland, I wanted to start with this quote. One of the books I read was by Vine Deloria, God is Red, A Native View of Religion. And that book was hard to read because it talked about all the ways, all the damage that has been done in the name of our faith. And how far in his mind and in mine it is from really Jesus' teaching. But anyway, this I find hope in. It's kind of funny. He said that religions change. This is toward the end of the book. That religions change is a foregone conclusion. To go from Jesus on the hillside advocating for a message of the Beatitudes to a cotton bowl filled with Jesus freaks chanting 2 bits, 4 bits, 6 bits, $1, all those for stand up, for Jesus, stand up and holler, indicates that anything can occur in a religious tradition. In other words, we can change. To me, that's a backhanded way of saying, yes, we don't have to keep being what we are. That was kind of a long stretch from the Beatitudes. But the point being that we do change, we do reform, and that was one of the reasons that we chose to go to Scotland, because Scotland is the birthplace of Presbyterianism, where the Reformation took hold. And this is St. Giles. This is the entrance to St. Giles Kirk, or Cathedral, where I spent a lot of time in prayer and meditation. This is where John Knox preached, and where that Reformation in the 1500s took place, where major changes happened. My thinking was, we are in this hinge time, as I said, and we are sort of in the middle of this, some sort of Reformation. We don't know what it's going to be. And neither did they. But it doesn't happen overnight. It won't happen in our lifetimes. But as I've learned from my reading of Native spirituality, what we need to think about is 7 generations from now, that we do our part in the limited time we have to give our children, grandchildren, and children generically, courage and hope, and to move us toward wherever God is leading us. So I went back to see, back when John Knox was stirring things up and they didn't know what was going, that was a time of upheaval as well. This is the inside of St. Giles Cathedral. And if you look, I want to draw your attention, this is the pulpit and the stonework. I'm going to have a close-up in a moment because I was so struck that I sat. During the day, there's so many people milling around that to meditate is a little bit of a challenge. But Sunday morning, Bob and I worship there. Only people that are worshiping are allowed in, so it's much quieter. But take a look at this. That pulpit from which John Knox preached, this, I think, see what it says? I was a stranger and you took me in. So each of those panels is each of those. I was hungry and you gave me. So this central piece for that cathedral, for that pulpit, for our tradition back then was what we are aspiring to follow now. I just like, wow. In stone. Then this is I was thirsty and you gave me drink. Now this is something also on the theme of the uneven and chaotic way that Reformation occurs. Has anyone heard of Jenny Geddes? She was just a fruit and vegetable seller. Apparently, if you didn't have money, you had to bring your own chair. You didn't get to sit in the pew. But on July 23rd of 1637, this Dean of Edinburgh was trying to reinstitute the Church of England, the prayer book. And she was so angry that because they had become reformed and were following a reformed worship, which didn't involve a prayer book, the kind of worship that we do. She got up while he was preaching. I'm glad our pew seat couldn't do this. And threw her stool at the preacher. It started a riot. Everyone started, fighting. I guess he never did finish his sermon. And apparently the church had to be closed for 3 days. Oh my. And that Book of Common Prayer never saw the light of day in that church again. But anyway, so this bench was created in the 90s sort of as a memorial for her, an artist rendering. But there is truth to this story. And we know from our own country how a single person's act of protest can turn into, what do we say, good trouble, good change. Now this, our very first, we only saw this one day. The first day we were in St. Giles was this amazing reflection from the sun. Can everybody see it?
Boy, that's a great picture.
Of course, we have sort of interesting light that happens in our sanctuary too, that happens and then it's gone. Which I think is a wonderful metaphor for how God gives us glimpses and epiphanies and callings, and we have to see them. If we don't look, we might miss them. This I took just for fun. This was also in St. Giles. See what it says, the embroidered covers for the Holy Table. Where's Kathy Phillips? Mm-hmm. I think that you're making so many of these beautiful things. Maybe now we need one of these, huh?
Sure, yeah. Send me that picture.
Well, and actually this was over, there was a little, I mentioned how it was a little hard to pray during the week when there are all these tours, but there was this little side room for prayer meditation, and with a few little chairs, a few pews, which was where I did some praying. And anyway, that was their little communion table where they kept them. So you can imagine, it took me right to Kathy Phillips.
That looks like it's in wrought iron, though, not in.
I mean, store them.
Yeah, no, it's a wooden chest to store them all in. Yeah.
It looks like this probably opens down. The hinges are on the bottom, so you can see them all. See the hinges on the bottom?
Yeah.
So the whole thing opens up.
Yeah, that these are
Yes,
hinges.
the top comes up at the bottom. So you can see them all.
I didn't dare touch it, so I don't know. And then just a couple of blocks from St. Giles is the John Knox house. Some of you have been to Edinburgh, maybe been there, where you can do a nice walking tour and just imagine what went on there. And actually that building has had many lives as well. But this here is about loving your neighbor. You shall love God and your neighbor as yourself, in sort of fancy English. Those core to our faith and our tradition. Bob, you might want to talk about this. God's first book. You spent a lot of time.
Yeah, our
There.
apartment was in the Newington section in Edinburgh, and just 4 blocks north was the entrance to this really spectacular park, Holyrood Park. Holyrood means sacred wood.
That's gorgeous.
And at the top of that park is a mountain called Arthur's Seat, which has all kinds of mythological associations with King Arthur. And walking up to Arthur's Seat just became one of the main things we loved. We probably did it 7 or 8 times. And I'd had hip and knee issues through most of last year, but somehow hiking in that park healed my knee issues, and it felt really like little sacred journeys. So I don't know how much you want to get into the pub life of Edinburgh. The main thing was take
hold
that
that
hike
thought.
and end up in a pub and talk it over.
We're going to see that in a minute.
That's gotta be right.
So here's another view of the two of us
I
upstairs.
think you're cutting me off. I wanted to.
You'll see why in a minute.
Okay.
But certainly, as I mentioned, we spent a lot of time in God's first book, and it seemed an appropriate place both to hear God's call and to also resonate with these books of indigenous spiritualities that I was reading. Now this,
Oh, that's cool.
let's see, I have a note on it. This is also in Holyrood Park, but this is the remains of St. Anthony's Chapel, apparently the part that belonged to what was called the Kelso Abbey. This was built before 1426 because there was a record that the Pope gave money. We know about repairing buildings, right? Building and grounds. Back in 1426, the Pope had to give money for a repair of this building. So obviously it was built before then. And it likely may, they think, have been a skin hospice because there was a recording of a chaplain's notes back in 1581. So
Skin? What?
a skin hospice. It sounds like a place where they're receiving therapies for skin ailments.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, that doesn't, okay.
And of course, when we were there, I mean, now there's my handsome husband, but there was some sort of photo shoot going on. People now use that for, like wedding photos.
That'd be cool.
Okay, now you can talk about it. That's my sister. And Bob, this was a Killican pub that we enjoyed. God is beer is a sign that God wants us to be happy. So we wanted to make sure that people in Scotland were happy, just like they are in Wisconsin. So there it is.
Ooh, that's strong.
We like strong. But in this Killican bar, they had, how often? Once a month? Twice a month?
Yeah, 2 or 3 times a month.
Spoken word poetry. People would get up and perform. And so in those poems, and they were people of plenty of young adults, but some older folks too, we really got to hear the heart and soul of a lot of local people. And it was eye-opening. We saw Christ in that experience and enjoyed ourselves. We went from Edinburgh and Scotland, which is considered the birthplace of Presbyterianism. Also, we have relatives in Geneva, Switzerland, near Geneva. So we, of course, had to stop by the Reformation Museum there because John Knox went to Geneva, and that's where John Calvin, you've heard that name, really established much of what we're trying to follow in terms of our call to be a part of what's going on in the city, of justice within the public sector, and how to do that. John Knox learned from Calvin, was very influenced before he went back and established all that he did in Scotland. And there's Lake Geneva, and that is my niece. I just couldn't resist. They have wonderful vineyards there, and we went for a wonderful walk in the beautiful, beautiful land. And the other point I wanted to make regarding our native lands, native Presbyterian Scotland, my name, Brubaker, comes from Switzerland. So that feels like native home to us. Now you see, I took this picture because we did a lot of studying. This is from, it took us a while to find the right library. There are lots of them in Edinburgh, but this is where Bob and I both enjoyed some marvelous study. Look how high these books.
Yeah.
You've probably seen these kind of libraries where you have to take a ladder to get, I mean, we have our own, we didn't take books out of the library, but it's a wonderful space to study. And then we were off to the island of Iona, where St. Columba started Christianity. That was way back in 521 to 597 were his dates. I took a picture of this trough because it was right outside. It really struck my fancy. Connects with letting the earth, letting stones, letting water, God speak to us through these elements. And this was actually called the Cradle of the North Wind. The thought on this trough, which is right outside the Iona Abbey, was that pilgrims may have washed their feet before they entered the abbey after walking a long way. And that this stone actually predates the 13th century abbey building that is there now. So just think about the generations upon generations and how long that has stayed there. And just a little tradition was said that if you threw 3 handfuls of water, you could ask St. Columba for a favorable wind when you set back out to sea.
Is the water, is it like fed from underground or is that
No,
just
it's just
rainwater?
rainwater. Yeah. Speaking of Columba, he was the revered saint and founder of this community, which has also gone through many changes, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But the sculpture, you saw the sculpture of his body. At the bottom of it, it says, back on his feet, that this people used to touch this statue who were hoping for miracles of healing, and the whole thing kind of crumbled, but his feet remained. And then this beautiful statue was made to remember him by. This is also in the Iona Abbey. If you go up some stairs, there's a tiny, tiny little prayer room. It's just dark, 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 with this one window that I also spent time in as well. And this is when we spent 2 nights on the island of Iona, and we stayed in what's called a pod, which is sort of like a tent, except a little more. So Bob took this picture of me working on breakfast or something, and you can see they had free-range chickens there.
It's looking for
Did you have chicken for lunch?
Well, I mean, there was this catering service where they said, chickens from the island. It's like, how local do you want your chickens to be?
Yeah, well, we had lamb from
Yeah.
the flock that was all around our clock,
Oh.
which kind of freaked me out. They're just right there.
Yeah, and
They do that in Chile.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's a joke. I'm sorry, bad joke.
this is from the top of the Dunny Hill in Iona, which was right at the foot of where we were staying, that we also climbed to, and you could see 360 all around. And that is the cairn at the very top. There's our friends, some of them.
Doesn't look like a lamb.
And this I took a picture of because this is what the Iona Abbey is really focused on now, welcoming of all people. And it also seeks to be interfaith, interspiritual, and just reaching out in every way that they can with the love of Christ. So that was good to see. Just threw that in. As you can see, we're having a good time. And there was water everywhere. So then, this is not Scotland. When we got home, we took a trip westward, still enjoying the water. and the river. This was just east of Missoula, Montana, on our way out to a family reunion. And what else can I say?
Do you know the name of it?
Yeah, it was Beaver
Beaver Tail State
Tail State
Park.
Park. Yeah.
I'm going to Montana on Thursday.
Oh,
Oh, wow.
Whitefish and
nice.
Columbia Falls.
Cool. So he had to sit like that with his feet in the water because it was in the 90s this summer
Yeah.
out there.
Right, it was really
It was
hot.
hot.
It was a hot day, but
Yeah,
the water
yeah.
felt good.
Yeah.
It was cold and it was really fast.
A lot of snow melt through this.
So as we think about passing on our faith to the next and letting it evolve into how God is calling us to be, this is 3 generations of Davises that gathered. That was our inspiration for driving out to Gig Harbor, which is near Tacoma. And we've got 3 generations there. The Tacoma Rainers is the farm team, minor league, for theirs.
Pastor Laurie, the first slide you had was Flathead Lake.
The very first one, yeah.
Yeah, and was that located out there?
In Montana, right, in northwest Montana. It's near Glacier Park.
Okay.
Yeah. Did you guys, when you went out, did you get there?
No.
Part of our westward journey was a chance to kind of take advantage of seeing the lands out west that I was reading about, and we know were taken, as was Wisconsin, we'll get to that, from those who were already there. This saying, I read it actually when we were in Scotland, but it's from Chief Luther Standing Bear. I have his whole book. But he said, "We did not think of the great open plains, the beautiful rolling hills, and the winding streams with tangled growth as wild. Only to the white man was nature a wilderness, and only to him was the land infested with, quote, wild animals and, quote, savage people. To us it was tame." Think about that. To us it was tame. Earth was bountiful, and we were surrounded with the blessings of the great mystery. Not until the hairy man came from the east and came upon us with brutal frenzy, heaped injustices upon us and the families that we loved, was it wild. When the very animals of the forest began fleeing from his approach, then it was that for us, the Wild West began. Kind of opened my eyes, and maybe yours too, to seeing that history, seeing those people, seeing ourselves, maybe in a way that Christ would have us see. So we went to, I don't know where this is. Does anybody else recognize it? We went from, Tacoma to the Little Bighorn. When I was growing up, it was called Custer's Last Stand. Which, by the way, when I was growing up, how did we learn about Indians? Bonanza, a Little House on the Prairie. Right? And so we have a lot of learning to do. And luckily, fortunately, actually, we learned it had a little to do with a fire, wasn't it? The understanding of what happened at the Battle of Little Bighorn, it was told from the white people's perspective for a long, long time. And then a fire, which is a bad thing, turned out to be a good thing because it exposed some of the bones and the actual history of what went on there. And it came to light really what happened. And so now, and when we were there, we took a tour that was led by a couple of Native women that told the story from their perspective, but also from some of the history we know of.
Can I say one thing about that, what you're seeing? The bodies of white soldiers are marked with markers, with stone markers. So you can chart the progress of the battle by where those markers are. And when Benteen's cavalry came at the end of the fight, they were able to mark those grave sites. But all the Native American losses, they were left on the field. So there's no way of marking or naming them. And what's happened then is that Native people have tied prayer flags to these bushes as a way of marking and memorializing it. This was really a catastrophic fight for both sides. A transformational battle in in Cheyenne culture and in Sioux culture as much as it was in these white losses. But the way they remember the dead is so different. So it doesn't have to do with where the body fell. It has to do with marking this as sacred, as prayer space, a sacred space, with these hand-torn and hand-tied flags on trees and bushes like that.
Which brings up a theme that I first read most thoroughly in God is Read, about how the sacredness of place is primary. For white Western people, it's more about time and linear time, but the sacredness of place is how, as Bob mentioned, events and history and culture and identity are marked. And so these were to, if you can you see what it says on these stones? It says, it has the name in the native language. The one on the left is Limber Bones. A Cheyenne warrior fell here on July 25th, 1876, while defending the Cheyenne way of life. And it's the same phrase on the one on the right, but that person's name was Closed Hand. Because that's all they were doing. They were just trying to defend their way of life. The land that was, well, they believed it to be God's, but after it being God's, it was the land that they inhabited that was extracted, especially as precious resources from colonizers saw that it was valuable, more valuable to them. Then these are the white markers. These are of Custer's soldiers that fell. I was also kind of moved. I'm not sure where we learned this. I think it was at this museum, about how a lot of the people that were in that army were refugees. That, that so many people get caught up in this structural evil, that it was hard at that time for refugees, especially depending on what country you're from, to get work. And if you joined the army, you'd have food and you'd have a place to stay. And so they were sort of swept in and not trained, and there just because it was some kind of a job in terms of the worker people, the poor people that were involved, the people without, the people that Matthew 25 refers to.
The markers are scattered too. You're up there.
Have you been there?
Yeah, it's kind of, I don't know if it's terrifying or if it's moving, but you see, there's those two way in the back, and then there's a couple way over here. They're just scattered. They're just
Definitely worth going there.
yeah.
You've been, and thank you for encouraging us to. And we got there first thing in the morning. I think Mark Borkhardt suggested that because it gets really filled up. So if you just want to get a sense of that sacred place and the quiet and just look at the landscape, it helps to get there when it opens. And then this is a sculpture also there to memorialize. There's a whole beautiful stone sculpture there.
And the wall that had all the names that went around in a circle. So
Yeah. If you invite Bob and me over to dinner, you can see the wall. I just thought it was really hard to see.
That's a more recent addition.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, because I was there and my kids were little, like 25, 30 years ago.
So then we went from there to the Crazy Horse Monument. It was raining, and as you know, it's kind of near Mount Rushmore. But this is this beautiful sculpture that has been how many years in the making already?
It is
60 years.
75, this is their
anniversary
anniversary this
this
year.
year.
We went,
Yeah.
took the grandkids there.
Yeah.
Yep.
And they've still got a long way to go.
Yes, and this is the third generation of the Quilters
But,
family that are working on it.
There's that's and it
When
is,
I saw it.
yeah.
But it's all on donations. There's no government.
Yeah,
Right,
there's no
right.
government involved.
Yeah.
And there's also, in addition to this magnificent sculpture that will take many generations and has already, there is now a university and there's an art museum. I mean, there's just a wealth of culture that has been built up, which is
Their plans are for a medical center and an airport and everything all in this area.
Wow.
This is all sacred ground too. And,
And that's why it's there.
right, and one of the quotes was, they asked Crazy Horse where his people were, and the reason he's pointing his finger is because he says, out there where he buried them.
Oh, I didn't know that.
To give you a sense of the size of this, that little hole that you see there
Enormous.
is 100 feet tall.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, you're a long ways away.
Yeah.
It's enormous.
It's huge.
That's its head.
Are those people up on top?
Yes, you can.
No, those are trees.
Well, there's
Well,
some,
there are people on top too, and you can, for a fee, take a
You
ride to
can
the
take a
top.
bus, yeah.
And you can actually go out and
No,
walk on.
no, the
this
bus
under-
just goes through.
You can.
Oh, for $125,
Oh.
you can get a hard hat and be a storyteller and stand on his hand.
Oh, wow.
There when I saw it.
We also happened to be there when there was a father and a son and a daughter doing hoop dancing. Another video you can see if you invite me over.
That's really cool. That's really cool.
Yeah,
saw that
but
too.
because not only did we watch them, and that looks really hard, by the way, with all those hoops, they invited all of us. I mean, true to the tradition, first they invited the kids up, who were a little bit, because they'd just seen this, like, I don't think I can do this thing with these hoops. But anyway, then they invited so they had all of us, like whatever, 100 of us in a big circle.
And they look like hula hoops, but they're not. They are actually handmade hoops. That's what the gal told us who did the dance. And she learned the dance from when she was 5.
So you can see one of the themes is that I'm offering are the sentience of rocks and trees and people. So, okay, this was a sign that we were getting close to home. See what that says? This is a rest stop. It says pet exercise area, no hunting. I'm like, we must be close to Wisconsin. Yeah, it was actually Minneapolis. So, home again. And actually, thanks to Mark's book that got me started learning this about Wisconsin, the history of Native First Nations folks in Wisconsin, about the Skunk Hill settlement. Who's heard of that? Looks like maybe.
Also known as Powers Bluff.
Right, it's Powers Bluff, although Powers the white guy.
Yeah.
You know. And I cannot pronounce. That's the way you pronounce
Potawatomi?
Taquaki.
Potawatomi.
I mean the name of Skunk Hill in Potawatomi is Taquaki. But this, and maybe as you guys have seen some of these, I think it's been written up in Hub City Times and stuff. You might have seen. This is an actual photograph. If you look at the bottom, it says Arpin, Wisconsin. That the Potawatomi who they were, made to go to Kansas, and then they came back because this was their land, their home originally, and did actually have a settlement right here in Wood County. It wasn't a reservation, and it kind of dwindled by the 1930s, but that wasn't that long ago. So there are certainly both ancestor or descendants of those folks, and also there's Friends of Powers Bluff. I went to one of their meetings in August, and some of the people in that group remember their grandfather playing, because the Indians went to school, and maybe Janet, maybe you got to know some of them when you were there earlier, because history is very recent. And
you might want to also, in Hub City Times, they have the 150, biographies. Chief John of this group was just featured in the last few weeks, and it's worth reading because
I'll forward
different
it
places
to
around Marshfield where they lived.
right.
In Marshfield.
I'll forward it to you.
That's my photo of Skunk Hill. This is a photograph. The library there has some wonderful photographs that I spent some time with. This was their dance circle. You can still kind of see it. It's near the parking lot. And people came from, actually Ho-Chunk came, and Menominee, people came from all over to join in the dance circle. I noticed one of the reasons this one jumped out at me is the way the word religion is in quotes.
Religious.
Yeah, which was, very much sacred, very much a religion, but shows some of our blindness to the present day even. This is at the bottom of the hill, the Indian Bill Cemetery, where folks are buried. And by the way, they were being burial. So it continues to be a sacred land. People come for various reasons, Native people. There is one thing I learned when I went to this meeting was it's not real clear how best to move forward, and that's part of what we'll be looking at in the days ahead. But in terms of how to advocate and partner and be relative to these folks in that taking their lead, there's this kind of feeling on the one hand that it needs to be protected, but they also don't want to draw attention to it because unwanted attention can bring people digging, people desecrating. So there isn't an easy answer. But getting back to some of my learning in terms of looking to the seeds of Reformation and this hinge time that we're in and where God might be calling us as friends of Jesus, people of faith. This was something I read that we're being reset, that we need to reset our definition of mission to include restoration of all creation by dismantling the systems that perpetuate injustice. That's something that goes beyond one faith tradition and can, I think, unite us. As the next paragraph suggests, there really, if you think about it, in this polarized, divisive world of ours, there really is one side, the side of creation, one reality, the principles of life. This is new for us. We have to see things in a different light. But to reset our minds to acknowledge this fact, and this also goes against the Wall Street Journal that thinks we have, unlimited resources. It's a scientific fact. We are all part of a closed system of mutual dependence. There is no new earth, air, or soil, so that what we do impacts every one of us, sooner or later. And to see that is one of the things I think that Christ is calling us to open our eyes to. So the word that I came up with throughout, it kept coming up for me, I should say, which is a big one, is the word decentering. There are many, many different levels of way to thinking about that, from the spirituality of centering, putting God in the center of our soul and letting God lead us rather than letting our ego and letting our own personal whims take center stage. So letting God be in the center of our lives as an individual and as a church. But decentering by looking for the divine mystery, I've already alluded to this, reflected far and wide, yes, in a neighbor and a relative, a stranger, also a tree, a bird, a river in creation. So decentering ourselves as human beings, realizing that we're part of this interdependent, amazing creation that God made. And so recognizing the sacredness of the earth and human beings of all faiths and religions, including those who don't practice the faith. So this term kept coming up and is one for us to think about, but decolonizing Christianity, because there's a lot behind that we don't need to get into right now, but we will in the future. But that settler colonial Christianity, this land, it's ours. It's here for us. We're going to establish our culture as the culture and our faith as the faith. And you've got to, so somehow we've wed the teachings of Jesus with our particular culture to great damage. And so the idea is, if we're decolonizing Christianity, we can use that word evangelism in the way of stepping into the oneness of creation rather than as a tool to erase other cultures and religions. Oh no, another sermon, huh? Anyway, decentering, we'll work with that. There's a lot there. The more you look at, the more you see. So, next generation, there's me having fun with Lily, who Bob just took care of this week. She got sick. But there she was, enjoying the lake. And, what do we teach the next generation? This, if I can get it to play, we're back in Iona. And I don't know if I can get the sound to play. But this little girl was learning from her mom how to shepherd these sheep. She's calling out the same little words, the same little sounds that her mom is doing. Those paws are where Bob and I were staying, but there you can see their
Well, turn
farm
off
and their
the mute.
farmhouse is
Yeah,
right
the
over
little
there. And so she's like kind of trying to do what her mom is doing, but then you'll see she gets a little bored with it. But
Did a good job, though.
but it was so cute. This little kid, 4 years old,
Can you
calling
hit
out to
the-
the sheep.
Can you hit the mute button on the bottom there? Just
If
with
I
your
unmute
arrow?
it, it'll be all this. I don't know. I don't know that I set it up for that.
Okay.
It's not that long a video, but anyway, you can imagine.
That little pink coat.
That's a big house.
No.
You can just spot her.
So what do we, this is my son-in-law, Carl, reading to Grace, our youngest. You know, what stories do we tell? What stories do we share with our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren? Because they're the ones that are going to be living in this earth that we are leaving for them. It's something to think about. And I will just say, by the way, that was the 8th time that Grace wanted that book read to him, read to her. And he was as animated as he was the first time.
Oh.
Please, baby, please. Anybody with that age group know that one? And then there's, you know, you got to teach fishing, right? There's Bob passing on. We can see one person is interested and one person not so much.
Is that Isabel? And
That's
Joel?
Isabel on the left. Yeah, who just started kindergarten. And then the other person is Zoe, right?
Yeah, Zoe, I thought so.
And then here they are. I'm teaching them how to make strawberry pie in our kitchen.
Ooh. That was more interesting to her than fishing.
And so, and there she is on my stand-up paddle board. You know, you think about what are we leaving them? What are we sharing? What can we offer them that will give them courage and hope? So this word ambe is an Anishinaabe word that means attention. Come on, let's go. Let's take action. I learned it from Patty Crawwick's book, Becoming Kin. I've got that there in the middle. Great book. An Indigenous call to unforgetting the past and reimagining our future. What we need to look at that we haven't seen, and to what we are being called with. So she suggests actions at the end of each chapter with that word ambe. So ambe for us, there are many. One that I'm hoping that we'll work toward is, and we've begun to form, but we haven't had a first meeting yet, a team that would working toward a land acknowledgement. I mean, does anyone know? Raise your hand if you know who lived here before the whites came along.
Yeah,
Who were the
I
First
just sent
Nations?
it to you.
Here in Wood County, beside the Potawatomi, the Ho-Chunk?
No,
Yes,
that's,
Ho-Chunk. It's a little hard to know exactly, but definitely the Ho-Chunk, the Menominee, possibly Ojibwe. Yeah,
Mhm.
we're here first. And a respectful land acknowledgement works with the reality that it's not just those people lived there then. Those people are living here now. Once again, have we seen them, or are they invisible? So to me, when have we seen you? All the ways that we don't see, and also we forced Native peoples to be invisible in one way or another. That our call in terms of dismantling structural racism right here in our land is to partner with these folks and to work toward a land acknowledgement for us as a church, possibly as a community, depending on how many people we get involved. So there's the naming the traditional people who were here, but also land acknowledgement in terms of, to me, acknowledging how we depend on the land. And that is our, it's not a metaphor, common ground. So acknowledging the kindness of land, the grace with which the land cares for and sustains all of us. We remember and grieve and make room in the course of this for difficult conversations that we need to look and listen and learn from sins of the past, structural evil and racism. And so to me, that is a piece of decentering through listening, remembering, and rejecting the invisibility that would lead toward restoration and healing in America. As Stan McRae, Cree elder, this is another saying that I can't get out of my mind. He said, we don't need help, we need relatives. There's a big difference. Help is here, you know, I'm the white person or I'm the privileged person, that what can I do to help you? That's not it. We need to recognize that we are all related, we are all relatives, and so that means to develop relationship, partnering, listening, becoming a family of humankind. So how we can do that right here in our neck of the woods is the question in my mind that I take forward from the sabbatical. This is my last slide from, I think, from the Holy Wisdom Monastery. I took a 3-day retreat at the end of my time, the third day of which I came home and broke this wrist. Listening, walking, learning, sifting through all the different things that God opened my eyes to and my heart to, and I'm eager to share and walk forward with you all. One of the things I did learn about sabbatical is that the transformation, the learning that occurs doesn't end the day you get back, that it's a process that now we get to work on and learn together, and it could be months or more before we see what these seeds have, how these seeds have germinated that were planted for you and for me in these 3 months away. Now, I have a little piece I want to end on. What time is it? 10 of 12. If you have questions before I offer this, good time to ask.
Is the prayer card that we did, some of those came from Braiding Sweet?
Yeah, that came,
Okay.
that came, the Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
that came
I
from
would
there.
encourage people to pick one of those out there on the table out there if you don't already have one.
And we are
That
gonna-
book and that book we read on the book group.
Yeah.
And Caitlin Curtis, she's coming to the Holy Wisdom Monastery. I think Linda signed up to go hear her on, I think, October 21st. So that is another ame, another action. That's right. Then 2 others. Where's Stanberg still here? Yeah, another, he's already begun. I've signed up. I had to miss the first one. But this book, The Land is Not Empty, Following Jesus and Dismantling, that's our word, the Doctrine of Discovery. She is Mennonite from the Anabaptist tradition, and I was so intrigued and challenged by this book, and I'm like, gee, I wonder what the Presbyterians are doing about it. Well, the good news is, what do we have, 100 people on the Zoom study?
125.
And Dan was able to, it just started, so you can jump on. It's like a 5-week thing on Tuesday nights by Zoom.
And they're not recording them just because there's so many personal expressions given during the call. But they will be recording the last one because the author of the book will be with us to talk and answer questions. So that might, even if you don't go on any, that might be.
She also has a podcast, which is great, that I've listened to.
I was just gonna say, they ask you to commit to being a part of it each and every week, pretty much. So I thought it would be something you could just sort of drop in and drop out, but
Well, that's
I don't
what I'm
think
gonna
that's
do.
the,
Just because I meet on Tuesday nights.
Yeah.
I know they don't want you to.
they don't want you to.
So yeah, that's an excellent book. That's a great study, and I'm hoping that might get us Presbyterians figuring out some
And it's
actions.
a very easy read.
The Land is Not Empty
The Land is Not Empty.
by Sarah Augustine. I also, another action, if any of you are interested in taking a walk at Skunk Hill at Powers Bluff, it's a beautiful park in Arvin, and I know a couple of people that can know how to show you what to look for, because it's the trees and the rocks, you have to kind of know what to look for. But if anybody's interested, let me know, because I will organize a nature walk and to walk those sacred lands together with some of you would be a wonderful thing. Other questions?
A little over 3 months ago, I thanked you for leaving
You did.
and for what you would learn and we would learn. And today I'd like to thank you for returning. The learning through your studies and experience. as you call us to, Amave?
Ambe?
Amave, that
Yeah.
you'll be calling us to that. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Well, you are welcome. I'm, a debt of gratitude to, speaking of debts from my scripture, to all of you, because as you can imagine, the demands of being your full-time pastor don't allow me to step back and do all that I did. And so that's life-giving for me and hopefully for all of us as a community. I wanted to end just with a thought. This is from Caitlin Curtis. For us to think about, and actually it ends with a kind of a poem prayer. She wrote toward the end of this wonderful book called Identity, Belonging, and Rediscovering God, Native. What if the whole point is that growth comes when we least expect it, and we return to the same sacredness we are born from? The point is that while we are here, mystery, capital M, mystery asks us to set aside what disrupts our humanity and belonging for the chance to see what is good and to fix the things that have been broken by hate. As we go, let's pray into the world what we believe is possible. Prayer is only a whisper of what could be, what is, the memory of what was yesterday, 10 minutes ago, when we last blinked and realized that what you are is something we cannot grasp, but long to know in the depths of us. Make room, for we are simply beginning, the sprout that will grow and form the landscape of tomorrow. Breathe on us, we pray. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.